The timestamp said 12:23 a.m. The house was completely dark, and my brother Decker walked straight to our father's nightstand like he'd done it 100 times before, because he had. He pulled out a key none of us knew existed, opened the lockbox, photographed every document inside, and was gone in 11 minutes. Our father stirred twice and never woke up. And that wasn't even the worst thing we found on those cameras, not even close. If this story feels familiar, if you've ever been the one who stayed while others took, drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one, and if you're new here, please subscribe because this community of women who refuse to stay silent, it means everything to me. My name is Ren. I'm 47 years old, and I live in a small town outside of Indianapolis, Indiana. And I need to tell you something that took me almost 8 months to be able to say out loud without my voice breaking completely. My father, Hollis, was diagnosed with dementia 3 years ago. He was 79 years old, still sharp enough in the early days to make his terrible coffee every morning and argue about the weather forecast like it had personally offended him. He was stubborn and funny and warm in that quiet way that some fathers are. The kind who never said I love you easily but would drive 40 minutes in the snow to bring you soup when you were sick. That was Hollis. That was my dad. When the diagnosis came, everything shifted fast. Faster than any of us were prepared for. Within 8 months, he couldn't manage his medications alone. Within a year, he was getting lost between his bedroom and the bathroom. My husband Tobias and I made the decision that felt obvious to us. We would move Hollis into our home, set up the spare room, coordinate his care, keep him somewhere familiar, somewhere loved. My brother Decker made a different decision. Decker, who lived 35 minutes away. Decker, who had a flexible work schedule and a big house with a perfectly empty guest room. Decker decided that his contribution would be, and I want to be precise here, showing up once a month, sometimes once every 6 weeks, staying exactly long enough to eat whatever I'd cooked, tell Dad a few jokes, and leave looking like the devoted son of the year. And every single time, before he walked out the door, he would squeeze my shoulder and say, "You're so good at this, Ren. Dad's lucky to have you." I used to think that was affection. I know now it was strategy. I gave up my bookkeeping clients to do this. Not all at once. I tried to hold on, tried to work early mornings and late nights. But caregiving for someone with advancing dementia is not a part-time arrangement. It swallows your calendar whole. Tobias picked up extra shifts to cover what I'd lost income-wise, and he never once complained. Not once, but I felt it. I felt the weight of what we were carrying, and I felt the lightness of what Decker wasn't. Still, I told myself it was fine. Dad needed me. That was enough. The first moment something felt wrong, genuinely, specifically wrong, was on a Thursday morning in February. I went in to help Dad with his morning routine, and he was agitated in a way I hadn't seen before, not confused agitated, which was familiar by then. This was different. He kept pulling at his blanket, kept looking toward the nightstand, kept muttering something I couldn't fully make out. I leaned in close. His eyes found mine, really found mine, one of those rare clear moments that dementia sometimes allows. And he grabbed my wrist with both hands. "Decker," he said, "the blue folder, Ren." Decker took the blue folder. I told him it was okay. I told him I'd look into it. I smoothed his blanket, and I got him his breakfast, and I told myself, quietly and firmly, that it was the disease talking. But I thought about that blue folder for the next 3 weeks straight. Tobias noticed before I said anything out loud. That was always his way. He watched me the way you watch someone you've loved for 20 years, reading the small things. The way I'd pause outside Dad's room before going in. The way I'd started double-checking the medication bottles at night, counting pills with my finger like I was doing something wrong by suspecting anything at all. One evening about a week after Dad grabbed my wrist, Tobias set down his fork at dinner and just looked at me. "You haven't slept properly in days," he said. "What's actually going on in your head?" I told him about the blue folder, about the way Dad had said Decker's name. Not confused, not rambling, but deliberate. Specific, like he was trying to hand me something important before the window closed. Tobias was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if we put cameras in his room, just for safety? Just to know he's okay at night when we're both asleep." I want to be honest with you. My first reaction wasn't suspicion toward Decker. It was guilt. It felt like an invasion of my father's privacy, like I was treating this warm, stubborn, complicated man like a patient instead of a person. I sat with that discomfort for 2 days, and then I thought about his face in that clear moment, the grip of his hands on my wrist, and I said yes. Tobias ordered 2 small cameras, the kind that connect to your phone, night vision enabled, completely discreet. We placed one in the upper corner of Dad's room, angled to cover the bed and the nightstand. The second one we positioned specifically toward the nightstand itself, where Dad kept his evening medications in an orange pill organizer and where the small metal lockbox sat that had always held his important papers, his insurance documents, his social security card, his original will. We told nobody, not even Decker. The first 2 nights, nothing. Dad slept restlessly the way he always did, sometimes sitting up, sometimes muttering, but nothing alarming. I checked the footage each morning with my coffee, feeling slightly foolish, telling myself this was just peace of mind. The third night, I almost didn't check. I was exhausted and it was early and I had Dad's breakfast to start and 3 phone calls to return. But something made me open the app. The timestamp read 12:23 a.m. I watched my brother walk through our dark house like he owned it. And maybe, I understand now, he believed that he did. He didn't check on Dad. He didn't stop at the doorway to look in the way you do when you love someone and just want to make sure they're breathing. He walked directly to the nightstand with the focused efficiency of someone completing a task. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small key. He opened the lockbox, our father's lockbox, the one I hadn't even known there was a second key for. And he lifted out a folder, a blue folder. My father's words hit me so hard I made a sound I didn't recognize as my own voice. Decker stood there in the dark, in the blue-gray glow of his phone flashlight, and photographed every single page inside that folder. Methodically, completely. Then he closed the lockbox, returned the folder, pocketed the key, and walked back out of the house. 11 minutes total. Our father stirred twice during those 11 minutes. Once when Decker first came in, and once right near the end, his hand moving toward the nightstand like some part of him knew. He never fully woke up. I sat on the kitchen floor with my phone in my hands, and I stayed there for a long time. Not crying, just completely, utterly still, because something had just rearranged itself permanently inside my understanding of my own family. And I hadn't even looked at the financial records yet. I didn't call Decker that day, or the next. I needed to understand what I was looking at before I said a single word to anyone, because I already knew, from a lifetime of being his sister, that Decker was extraordinarily good at making me feel like the problem. He had been doing it since we were children. I'd bring something up and somehow, by the end of the conversation, I'd be the one apologizing. So I started digging first. The problem was that I had almost no access to Dad's finances. I hadn't thought much about that before. Decker had positioned himself as the family's financial helper years ago, back when Dad was still sharp, framing it as a kindness. "You've got enough on your plate, Ren. Let me handle the money side." Dad had agreed because Decker had always been the one who talked confidently about numbers and accounts and investments, and Dad trusted confident people. He always had. I started with what I could find physically in the house: old bank statements in the filing cabinet in Dad's closet, a folder of investment documents from 4 years back, and something that stopped me completely cold: a power of attorney document dated 3 years ago, signed 6 weeks after Dad's diagnosis, giving Decker full legal authority over Dad's financial and medical decisions. I had never seen this document. Not once. Nobody had ever mentioned it to me. I sat on the closet floor reading it 3 times. The signature was Dad's. The notary stamp was real, but 3 years ago, 6 weeks after diagnosis. How much had Dad truly understood about what he was signing? How carefully had that timing been chosen? My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the paper down. Over the next 4 days, I pieced together what I could. An old joint account Dad had shared with my mother before she passed, drained down to almost nothing over 2 years. A certificate of deposit that should have matured and renewed, gone. Decker's name appearing on documents that should have required Dad to be fully competent and fully willing. Every piece of it wrapped in just enough legitimacy to look clean at first glance. This wasn't sloppy. This was careful. This had been planned. I finally called Decker on a Sunday afternoon. I kept my voice completely even. I told him I'd noticed some things in Dad's paperwork and just wanted to understand them better. His response was immediate and perfectly warm. "Ren, of course. I've been meaning to sit down with you about all of that. Dad's finances are in great shape, I promise you. I've been really careful with everything." Then a small pause, a gentle shift in tone. Are you doing okay? You sound exhausted. You've been carrying so much. Maybe it's making things feel more overwhelming than they are. There it was, 20 seconds flat. I told him I was fine. I told him thank you. And I got off the phone and went back to the camera footage because I needed something that couldn't talk its way out of a corner. That's when I found the second thing, the thing that made the lockbox feel almost small by comparison. I had been reviewing footage across multiple nights, going back 5 weeks, watching methodically. And I started noticing a pattern I had missed the first time because I hadn't been looking for it. On nights when Decker visited, Dad's evening medication routine was slightly different. Not dramatically, not in any way that would alarm someone watching casually, but Decker was moving pills, removing one, sometimes substituting something from his own jacket pocket. Small, deliberate, consistent. He wasn't just stealing from our father. He was keeping our father confused on purpose. I want you to understand what it feels like to know something that enormous and not be able to say it out loud to anyone. You walk around your own house carrying this weight that has no shape yet, no legal form, no protection. You watch your father eat his breakfast and you know that his own son has been chemically managing his confusion like adjusting a dial. And you cannot say a word yet because if you tip Decker off before anything is in place, he will move faster than you. He has already proven he is faster than you. He had a 3-year head start. I found Sylvie through an internet search at 2 in the morning. Elder law attorney, Indianapolis area, 22 years of experience, reviews that mention the words fierce and she doesn't back down, and that was enough for me. I emailed her at 2:17 a.m., and she responded by 7:45 the next morning. We met 3 days later at her office, and I brought everything. Printed bank statements, the POA document, photographs of the lockbox footage, a written timeline of every night visit I had documented. Sylvie listened without interrupting. She had this quality of absolute stillness when she was absorbing information, like nothing you said was going to shock her, but everything you said mattered. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "This is elder financial abuse. What you're describing with the medication, that moves this into a criminal territory. You understand that?" I told her I understood. She told me exactly what we needed to do. File a report with Adult Protective Services immediately, which would begin an independent investigation outside of anything I controlled. Continue documenting every single night on those cameras. Do not confront Decker again. Do not let him know the legal process had started, and do not under any circumstances let him know about Sylvie. He needs to believe he still has the advantage, she said. The moment he feels cornered, he'll start moving assets and covering tracks. Right now, his confidence is working in your favor. I filed the APS report that same afternoon from the parking lot of a grocery store, so Tobias wouldn't hear me on the phone and worry more than he already was. The caseworker assigned to us was calm and methodical, and told me an investigator would begin within 72 hours. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes afterward, watching people load groceries into their cars, and thinking about how ordinary everything looked from the outside. How completely ordinary. Staying silent after that was the hardest sustained effort of my entire life. Every morning I checked the footage. Every evening I watched Decker's name light up on my phone with some casual text. "How's Dad doing?" Or, "Let me know if you need anything." And I would type back something neutral and small, and set my phone face down on the counter and breathe. Then Decker called a family meeting. He framed it beautifully. He always did. He sent a message to me, our Aunt Bet, and Dad's oldest friend Walt, who had known our father for over 40 years and was as close to family as anyone without the bloodline, saying he wanted everyone together to discuss Dad's care plan going forward, that he'd been doing research, that he had found a memory care facility that he thought would give Dad the dignity and specialized attention he deserved. It sounded loving. It was constructed with the precision of someone who had been planning it for months. A facility Decker chose would mean Decker controlled every aspect of Dad's remaining life. His visitors, his medications, his documents, everything. And my daily access, the thing that had allowed me to see what was happening, would be gone completely. He had looked at the board and seen a clean path to checkmate. What he didn't know was that I had already changed the entire game. The meeting was at our house. That was intentional on my part. Decker had suggested a neutral location, a coffee shop, somewhere public and controlled. But I told him it made more sense to meet where Dad was comfortable. where everything was familiar. He agreed easily because he thought home territory worked in his favor too. He thought he knew this house. He thought he knew me. Aunt Bet arrived first, in her good coat, the way she always dressed when something felt important to her. She was 71, sharp as anything, and she had always loved Decker in that particular way that older women love the charming men in their families, completely and without much scrutiny. She hugged me at the door and whispered, "Your brother means well, Wren. He really does worry about your father." I smiled and took her coat and said nothing. Walt came in behind her, quieter, a little slower than the last time I'd seen him. He and Dad had been friends since their 30s. Fishing trips, shared holidays, the kind of friendship that outlasts almost everything. He sat down at the kitchen table and looked around the house the way people do when they're looking for the person who isn't there. And I understood that look completely. Decker arrived 7 minutes late, just late enough to make an entrance, not late enough to seem disrespectful. He had brought a folder, printed materials about the memory care facility, glossy photographs of the common areas, a breakdown of their specialized dementia program. He set it all out on the table with the ease of someone who had rehearsed this without appearing to rehearse it. He looked good, rested, certain. He started talking and I let him talk. He spoke about Dad's declining needs, about how home care, no matter how loving, had real limitations, about this facility, Maplewood Gardens, 40 minutes away, and their specialized staff, and their family communication portal, and their dignified, peaceful environment. He said the word dignified 4 times. I counted. He looked at Bet when he said it because he knew that word would land hardest with her. Bet was nodding. Walt was listening carefully, his hands folded on the table. And I sat across from my brother with my laptop closed in front of me, and I let him finish every single word. When he was done, he looked at me with this expression of careful, practiced gentleness. "Wren, I know this is hard. Nobody has given more than you have. But this is what's best for Dad now. We all know that." The room waited for me to respond. I opened my laptop. "Before we make any decisions," I said, "I just want to show everyone something." I had already cued the footage. I had chosen the clearest angle, the timestamp visible in the corner, the night vision sharp enough to see his face when he turned slightly toward the camera without knowing it was there. I pressed play, and I set the laptop in the center of the table where everyone could see. The room went so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. I could hear Bet's breathing change. I could hear Walt shift in his chair. On the screen, Decker walked through the dark house at 12:23 a.m. and went straight to our father's nightstand like he'd done it 100 times before. The real Decker, sitting 3 feet away from me, watched himself on that screen and went completely still. He started. "There's more," I said quietly. I had Sylvie already on a video call on my phone, propped against the fruit bowl at the edge of the table, her face calm and ready. The printed financial records were in a folder under my elbow. The APS case number was written on a notepad beside my coffee cup. Decker looked at the laptop, then at my phone, then at me. And for the first time in my entire life, my brother had absolutely nothing to say. Decker tried 3 times to speak. The first time, nothing came out at all. The second time, he said it was not what it looked like, and the words landed so hollow in that quiet room that even he seemed to hear how empty they were. The third time, he looked at Bet, reaching for the one person at that table who had always given him the benefit of everything, and Bet was staring at the laptop screen with her hand pressed flat against her chest, and she did not look back at him. Walt looked at Decker the way you look at something you thought you recognized, and suddenly don't. Slow, tired, like something was being subtracted from him in real time. Sylvie spoke from my phone in her measured, completely unrattled voice. She introduced herself, her credentials, her firm. She explained, calmly and precisely, what the footage documented, what the financial records showed, what the power of attorney timeline indicated about the conditions under which it had been obtained. She used words like exploitation and undue influence and criminal referral without raising her voice once, and every word hit the room like something solid dropping onto a hard floor. Decker's composure came apart in pieces rather than all at once. First his shoulders, then his jaw. He pushed back from the table and said this was a setup, that I had always resented him, that I was twisting everything because I wanted control of Dad's estate myself. He said it loudly. He said it looking at Bet and Walt like he was asking them to choose. Neither of them said a word. I didn't raise my voice either. I had promised myself I wouldn't. I looked at my brother, this man I had shared a childhood with, shared a father with, shared every family holiday and every family loss with. And I said, very quietly, "This isn't about me, Decker. It was never about me. It was about him. It was always about him." Decker left. He didn't slam the door. He just left, and the house felt strange afterward, the way rooms feel after something permanent has happened in them. The legal process moved with the kind of momentum that builds once it starts. The power of attorney was revoked within weeks. Dad's accounts were frozen, pending a full financial investigation. The APS findings supported everything Sylvie had already documented. Decker's access to the house, to Dad, to any of Dad's affairs, gone. His name removed from every document it had been placed on under circumstances that Sylvie described in legal correspondence as deeply questionable at best. I chose Dad's new facility myself. It took me 3 weeks of visits and questions and sitting in common rooms and watching how staff spoke to residents when they thought no one important was watching. I found a place called Birchwood, 12 minutes from our house, small enough to feel human, staff who learned Dad's name in the first week and used it every time they walked into his room. I visit every single day, sometimes twice. Dad doesn't know my name anymore. That happened gradually and then completely, the way dementia takes things, without warning, without ceremony. Some days he looks at me like I am someone he almost remembers. Some days he just holds my hand and watches the window. Last Tuesday, I sat with him for 2 hours in the afternoon light. He was calm. His hair was combed. Someone had put a small potted plant on his windowsill because the staff had noticed he always looked at the garden. He held my hand the entire time, and at one point he patted it twice, slowly, the way he used to when I was small and upset about something, and he didn't have the words. He didn't know my name, but something in him still knew me, and I held on to that with everything I had. Because I kept my promise to him, the one I made the morning he grabbed my wrist and told me about the blue folder. I stayed, I watched, I fought for him in every quiet way I knew how. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't satisfying in the way you imagine justice will feel when you're lying awake at 2 a.m. running through everything. It was just right, correct, like something that had been tilted finally leveling out. My father is safe. His last years will be dignified. And every morning when I walk into that room at Birchwood and he turns toward the sound of my footsteps, I know that I was exactly the daughter he needed me to be. That has to be enough. And somehow, it truly is.